This review for Tomorrow Never Dies has spoilers. Starting on February 21, 2020, this week is the 18th week of the James Bond Weekly Movie Marathon and the 18th movie of the James Bond franchise to watch is Tomorrow Never Dies. My rating for Tomorrow Never Dies is a 3 out of 5. And here's why. Tomorrow Never Dies came out in 1997. It is directed by Roger Spottiswoode. This is Pierce Brosnan's second movie portraying James Bond. It also stars Michelle Yeoh, Jonathan Pryce, Terry Hatcher, and Joe Don Baker. Which it just came to me when I was watching it. Joe Don Baker plays the CIA agent Wade in GoldenEye and in Tomorrow Never Dies. Like I said, it came as a surprise to me. He played the villain in The Living Daylights. He played Whitaker. So, a little piece of movie trivia for ya. He played 2 different roles in 3 movies. In the beginning of Tomorrow Never Dies, we see James Bond investigating an open weapons shop for terrorists. All the known terrorists of the world come to the secret location to buy weaponry. There they discover a secret GPS encoder by one man named Gupta. The head general of the Royal Navy would see that this is an opportunity to launch a missile and eliminate a lot of terrorists that are at the shop. But Bond would have to foil that because one of the jets is carrying a nuclear bomb. With the missile already on its way, James Bond decides to take off with that jet, and the action sequence in this prologue is really fun, and it leads into a Top Gun-ish type action sequence between 2 jets. It was a very cool action sequence where, in the end of it, James Bond would have to deal with a co-pilot that he knocked out as he was entering into the jet. He would wake up and start to choke out James Bond with one of the radio cords. While he was choking Bond out, Bond was also dodging gunfire from an enemy jet. The jet James Bond was in would end up underneath the enemy jet, and what he would do is eject the co-pilot seat into the other jet. It's a really cool ending to that action sequence. And then it goes into the title credit sequence, which I'd say this title credit sequence is very well themed to the themes of the movie. And the song Tomorrow Never Dies, sung by Sheryl Crow, is really good too. And then into the movie we see a scene with the Royal British Navy in the middle of the Pacific Ocean near China. There they would be encountered by Chinese jet fighters, telling them that they're in their section of the waters, where the Royal British Navy knew that they were actually in international waters, that they have the freedom to be there. With that, we already get a look at the villain's henchman and Gupta, who is a part of this terrorist group, that they are the ones manipulating the GPS locators of the jets and of the ship to think that they're in one place when they're actually in another. Their goal was to fool them so that they would attack each other, but none of them ended up attacking each other. It would be these terrorists on this stealth boat that would make it look like the jets attacked the ship and the ship attacked back at the jets. There they would use this big old sea drill to drill through the naval ship and basically eliminate all the survivors. As they were swimming towards this stealth boat, they would come out and use the right ammunition, which is the ammunition of the Chinese, to make it look like the Chinese army did it. And then we get revealed with the villain already in the beginning of the movie. Elliot Carver, the head of the Carver Media Group, as well as the Tomorrow newspaper he owns. And right at the beginning of the movie, we find out his plan. His plan is to cause major chaos in order to boost his ratings with the news. Unknowing of all this, James Bond and the rest of MI6 would see the news from Tomorrow. They would become suspicious of the Tomorrow newspaper because they were the first to send out the headline before anybody could. With that, James Bond would go investigate the Carver Media Group and Elliot Carver himself. There he would run into an old flame that is played by Terry Hatcher. Terry Hatcher's character, Paris Carver, is the wife of Elliot Carver. James Bond's suspicions would grow when he subtly interrogates Elliot Carver in a opening event party for one of Carver Media Group's entities. Elliot Carver would get some of his security guards to take James Bond back into a room, which is one of those sound recording rooms in the building. There they would get into a tussle, and once again James Bond would know that this needs to be investigated further. We would see Elliot Carver kill his own wife Paris in order to capture and kill Bond and try to use that for one of his news stories to boost ratings. There's a pretty cool car chase with one of the cars Q gave James. It was a funny scene when Q presented the car to him because he posed as an Avis rental car agent. And once again, the car of choice is a BMW, this time a BMW 750 with all the bells and whistles, and the car can be controlled remotely through his Ericsson cell phone. It's funny enough that phone showed a touchpad of sorts, but in real life, you know, we would have these smartphones where it's a touch screen, and it has a screen too. It's really interesting how some of this fictional technology predicted some of the technology we see today. Anyways, the action sequence with the BMW 750, in the story it showed off James Bond using the remote controls and controlling it remotely while hiding in the back seat, dodging gunfire. It would have missiles, bulletproof windows. At one point, how could have you predict that they would try to use a wire from one end to one end to try to stop the car, and then this thing comes out from the emblem and was able to cut that wire. And then the end of that action scene leads with James Bond jumping out of the car, still remotely controlling it, to the roof of that parking garage, and he would launch the car off the top and right back into an Avis rental car store. After James Bond's exploits in Hamburg, Germany, he would then travel to a US base in the South China Sea with help from Jack Wade again. There they would find the location of the sunken ship for James Bond to investigate. James Bond would perform a halo jump in order to reach there without being detected. Jack Wade provided a lot of comedic relief between him and James Bond. As James Bond was in the water, he would scuba dive into the ship. There he would run into Wei Lin, which he saw in Hamburg, Germany through all the action stuff. James Bond did manage to get that decoder back in Hamburg, Germany in one of Elliot Carver's facilities. That's how they were able to locate the ship. After Wei Lin and James Bond investigate the ship, they would go to the surface of the water. There they would be met by Elliot Carver's henchmen. They would be taken to Elliot Carver's building in Vietnam. There James Bond would see Elliot's full plan. Elliot Carver is doing all this because he wants to break into the Chinese market with his media and news journalism. The action sequence in Vietnam was actually really cool. Wei Lin and James Bond would escape their capture from Elliot Carver. They jump off a building, grab one of these big old banners that is hanging on the side of the building, and make their way down the building. Oh, and Wei Lin and James Bond are still handcuffed together. There they would manage to steal a motorcycle and try to escape Elliot Carver's men. Once again, it was a really cool action sequence with them on the motorcycle, them having to figure out how to position themselves while still being handcuffed, and then a helicopter would chase them. And there's one point where the helicopter would go near ground level and use the propellers to try to kill him. It's a pretty cool action sequence. Continuing on, once James Bond and Weyland separate each other from the handcuffs, we see Weyland go off on her own, and it really showcased Michelle Yeoh's physicality as an actress, as a martial artist, as it showcased her in her own fight scene. Showcasing her in her own fight scene was really cool to see in this movie. With James Bond and Weyland grouping back up together, they would try to find a source of where the stealth boat is based. Then it would lead to a battle on the boat. But first they would manage to sneak on it, but then they would get caught by the security cameras. And this last action sequence on the stealth boat was really cool. The director really showcased kind of like a John Woo-ish type of action scene, as a lot of the moments in that action sequence had James Bond and Weyland go akimbo, holding a gun in each hand and shooting bad guys. Gupta would get eliminated by Elliot Carver. James Bond would kill Elliot Carver by the sea drill. The final action sequence of the final action sequence was between James Bond and Elliot Carver's henchman Stamper, where Stamper captured Weyland and he would tie up Weyland in a chain and drop her into the ocean. James Bond and Stamper would fight on top of the missile that was set to launch at the Chinese. James Bond would manage to pin Stamper by pinning his foot within the missile and what was holding it. James Bond did put an explosive device on that missile so it would explode and not shoot away. There he would end up blowing Stamper. James Bond would manage to get into the ocean and save Weyland, and that's the movie. They would live happily ever after. And at the end of the movie, during the end credits, we hear Katie Lang's Surrender, which was the other theme song for Tomorrow Never Dies. Since they liked Katie Lang's song Surrender as well, they decided to put it in the end credits of Tomorrow Never Dies. At the end credits, we also saw the dedication and loving memory to Albert Broccoli, one of the major producers to help put the James Bond franchise into play in this pop culture world we see today. Anyways, Tomorrow Never Dies is an action-packed movie, pretty simplistic in its form, and the villain played by Jonathan Pryce, the writing of his dialogue is very corny in my opinion. There's no news like bad news. I did love the addition of Michelle Yeoh as the Bond girl. That would be of help to James Bond alongside him, and I love the fact that they showcased Michelle Yeoh's martial arts physicality. The action sequences were very good. In my opinion, Tomorrow Never Dies is the most simplistic of all the James Bond movies. I mean, you can point out the layers of this movie, but it is pretty much straightforward. Pierce Brosnan's second foray as James Bond was really good. I do have to say, as a preteen, I did watch this movie a lot back then. A bit of history for you all. Tomorrow Never Dies is the first James Bond film I saw in theaters. I did see GoldenEye before Tomorrow Never Dies, but I never saw GoldenEye in theaters. I saw it on its VHS tape back in the day, with a whole lot of action, but with the story not having the substance and the layers as previous James Bond movies. It's a bit lackluster, especially the dialogue. That is my review of Tomorrow Never Dies for the 19th week of my James Bond weekly movie marathon. You would watch The World Is Not Enough. Make sure to like this video, comment down below what you thought of Tomorrow Never Dies. Subscribe to the Spell Go YouTube channel if you haven't, and as always, thank you for watching.